Point of view, you are in England. Doesn't look a whole lot like England these days, does it? But I assure you, you are in the UK. I just have to inform you, we do have a new state religion. Exhibit A, King's Cross Station, this was 2 days ago, decided to put up a hadith on their train notice board. So the hadith, for our audio listeners in the holy month of Ramadan, inshallah, it says, Fajr, Maghrib, hadith of the day, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, all the sons of Adam are sinners, but the best of those sinners are those who repent often. It's a message of Islamic conversion. Plastered on a train notice board in one of the busiest stations of London. Really appreciate that. Now, if you feel a bit out of sorts, because you'd expected something else from arriving in the UK, if you just got off your plane and got your train into London, don't worry, we have an ambient representation of how it is to live in London these days, thanks to Cunley Drukpa, right?
We are sorry that the 1441 Virgin Train service to Glasgow Central is delayed by approximately 15 minutes. This is due to a wartime bomb near the railway.
Sorry, if anyone stood around in a...
Did you say that this is due to a bomb found on the railway? Is that what I heard? If it wasn't, I didn't hear such a thing. Just filled that in.
Either way, I'm glad that part of the ambience noise is a train being delayed.
Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the video, but I just want to direct your attention to the aesthetics range of merch that we have on the store. These are beautiful images that I think work really well as posters or mugs. So if you want to support us, going over to the merch store at shop.lotus.com is easily the best way other than signing up on the website.
If anyone has ever stood in a train station in London, particularly London Paddington, you will be surrounded by random babble as if you are in the rubble of the Tower of Babel.
Milling about
at train stations, yes. People shouting into a phone on speakerphone or having their FaceTime like that for some reason and speaking as if they're a Greedo from Star Wars. And then now constant delays because the overhead lines are down or because there's a bit of rain or because... I don't know, we've had some diverse activity near one of the railways. Anyway, so the reason that some of this sort of stuff is happening is, of course, because of the immigration issue. This is the reason they're trying to appease the new arrivals who don't quite like to integrate with what used to exist in the UK, but now are flexing their cultural supremacy. So GB News decided to say to Network Rail, oh, that's interesting. Are you guys going to do anything for other festivals? For example, Lent, that thing that's currently going on for the state church, which is the Anglican church, and all the other Christians like me, Catholic, in the country. A Network Rail spokesperson said to GB News, we value the feedback of our passengers, and while these messages were intended to celebrate the beliefs and backgrounds of some of our colleagues and passengers, we have removed them. Over recent years, King's Cross has celebrated significant religious and secular events from all cultures, including Easter, Diwali, Passover, Ramadan, and Remembrance Day. However, we will now review how occasions can be marked in future. Some of those are actually important and native to Britain. For example, Remembrance Day honours the sacrifices of those who died in the First and Second World Wars. Easter is the resurrection of Jesus Christ as marked by the national church. Diwali, only celebrated by our Hindu Prime Minister. Passover by Jewish citizens. But that's not the national religion. But it's obvious that there is a new national religion and it's being celebrated on behalf of people who, if they don't feel assimilated, or at least celebrated, might get a bit violent and a bit stabby. Now, we do have other commentators coming out and saying, well, this was a bit absurd. I mean, like Rakib Hassan, he's a British Muslim, and he even said, look, I'd welcome Christian messages over the course of Easter at King's Cross. A reinvigoration of mainstream Christian devotion would serve modern Britain well. Then in the comments, Rakib goes and responds to someone saying that, oh, would you do this for Hindus, Sikhs, and Jewish messages? And he goes, 100% Buddhist as well. No.
I'm not going to forget your policy exchange ideas, Rakib, of putting Afghanis into the homes of British people.
Yeah, that wasn't a very sensible thing to do. Yeah, it's almost like this has consequences. What I think Rakib wants to do, per his CapEx article as well that he wrote on this, is extinguish the pride flag from public life. And he thinks a unified front from religious organizations who are pro-family and pro-faith will send weird, degenerate ideologies into remission. The problem is these faiths have contradictory principles.
People from Islamic countries are not known for doing weird and degenerate things, are they?
No, certainly not. It's not like one of the leading Islamic countries, Iran, has one of the highest rates of transgenderism as a punishment for homosexuality.
How are they for rail travel, though? Because, I mean, if
Josh getting down to brass tacks.
If they make the trains run on time, all I'm saying is that, maybe we're wrong about Islam. Yeah, sorry. The number of delayed trains I've had, I'll convert in a heartbeat.
Let us know in the comments below how the trains run in Islamic countries where they have trains.
Well, I have seen reliably that they are always full in India.
They tick over quite a lot.
Yeah, quite. Anyway, so look, just because demographic change has occurred doesn't mean that we should be immediately culturally accommodating. I think that we should actually assert Britishness and Christianity as the supreme culture, because it's what predated these new arrivals, and it's why they came here in the first place. I don't think being dragged down to the lowest common denominator of the third world is a good thing to do, and it's not particularly pleasant to live around. Unfortunately, our institutions don't think so, and so we end up just on the baseline cultural level with circumstances like this. Carl played this yesterday with Ed Dutton, but here's a gentleman just sitting in his lunchroom, eating some pasta, and all of his Islamic colleagues are standing around and going, look at this kafar eating during Ramadan. And they intimidate him into putting his lunch away.
Well, all of a sudden I've got a craving for a bacon sandwich, and I'm going to eat it outside of a mosque. I'm pretty sure that's a hate crime, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, in Minecraft, hypothetically. Josh doesn't do that.
Also, given what Josh has just said, don't do that.
Yeah.
If you're watching and you got the idea. I would say that even if there was an argument that line actually did go up from importing these sorts of people in, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for this kind of abuse and intimidation that somebody like this rather normal-looking gentleman is getting simply for eating during a foreign holiday, which he doesn't follow.
Well, they've come into our country and they're trying to dictate terms to us. As far as I'm concerned, that's the best grounds for deportation I can possibly think of. It's like, yeah, you come to Britain as a guest, and you try and tell us how to conduct ourselves. No, I don't think so, actually.
Yeah,
that's a very sensible policy, Josh. Good job you're not running for reform.
You're actively hostile, and this is ethnic and religious bullying. If we were applying standards equally, of course, this would fall afoul of the Equality Act, but we're not going to, because it's not about equality or hypocrisy. It's always about hierarchy. And unfortunately, the new state religion, which is Islam, has the whip hand in this circumstance. And so this polite gentleman who is actually being unilaterally accommodating to his peers, bullying, is the one who is oppressed in this circumstance. But nobody's going to stand up for him. Instead, we're going to stand up for all the cultural enrichment that we're going to get soon. And this came across my timeline yesterday. A migrant was stabbed on a small boat while trying to cross the English Channel. Now, there is a BBC article here. If we can just pull it up, I'm just going to highlight it in the document. Because the BBC reported this as man treated for stab wounds after boat arrival. Just a man who was stabbed at some indeterminate point while crossing the channel.
That's really subversive, isn't it? That's unbelievable from the BBC. Migrant was stabbed on a migrant boat, and it destroys the narrative that they're coming here for safety, doesn't it? Because
hang on.
They're stabbing each other before they even get here.
He may have been stabbed in his country of origin and just staggered all the way across Europe, clutching his guts, boarded the boat, arrived in Dover, and loved our NHS so much that he just wanted to be inducted into it. Because the BBC is going to provide details. Oh, no, they don't.
Is that really how long the article is?
The article, for audio listeners, a man has been taken to hospital with stab wounds following the arrival of a small boat in Dover. Kent police said it was called just after 12:50 GMT to Dover Western Docks after the vessel arrived. The man's injuries were not described as life-threatening. The Kent force said it was carrying out inquiries to establish where, when, and how his injuries were sustained. No details on who it was. We don't even know from this article if the man was in the boat. It could have just been that a migrant boarded the shores and decided to stab someone.
Maybe they didn't pay off the RNLI enough. Who knows?
It's almost like you've presaged the taxi service that picked them up.
Oh, really?
This. Yeah, so the migrant that was stabbed on a small boat here, as GB News have the information, because GB News actually filmed them as they were coming in. The UK authorities, including a border force vessel and 2 lifeboats, attended the incident just before lunchtime. The dinghy was one of 8 small boats that reached the UK waters on the busiest day of channel crossing so far this year. They're getting very bold. GB News' Kent producer filmed as an ambulance arrived at the harbour to meet the lifeboat. A short time later, that ambulance left the hospital under blue lights, but there is no word yet on how seriously the injured migrant is. So it was the migrant, and it seems that he was injured aboard the boat. How interesting. The remaining group of more than 60 migrants from the boat at the centre of the incident were taken on board the Dover lifeboat. At Dover Harbour, police officers were seen at the quayside checking migrants as they came off the lifeboat. The migrants were then taken to the nearby Border Force migrant processing facility for further checks. Border Force processing. Oh, it's all right, lads. We'll just get you rubber stamped to go straight to a hotel. No rigorous interrogation detention for one of 60 or more potential stabbers, because we know that someone stabbed this guy. Like, we know they're actively stabbing people in boats.
Maybe it was a great white shark.
I mean,
Sorry.
From this description, and it was already obvious, and as it is, we don't actually have a border force. We have ushers to guide these people into the country.
It's a welcoming committee, and we have to pay for it.
I hope
We
they
have to pay
throw
for
them
the
a party every single time.
I'm not sure if I'm going to get myself into trouble here, but aren't they helping the people traffickers effectively?
Yes. Yeah, they're actively encouraging it by providing them a taxi service. And I think that's totally fair to say. The incident happened on the day a record 450 people crossed the English Channel in 8 small boats, taking advantages of an improvement in weather conditions. Wednesday's arrivals beat the previous one-day record this year when 401 small boat migrants arrived at the beginning of March. See, the Conservative government getting those numbers up.
So this is as we move into spring, when weather conditions are going to be better, when the weather is going to be warmer, it's going to be a bit easier, potentially, for them to get over the crossing, so we can expect those numbers to keep ramping up as we get closer and closer to summer.
Last year, we saw about 1,000 people a day crossing. So, and this is already 4,000 people this year. So
Poseidon bless us with tumultuous waters.
yeah, so we know at least one of these people is a murderous criminal, right? And absolutely nothing is being done to shake these men down and treat them under the suspicion which warrants the fact that the other ones are also probably covering up for a murderous criminal. And also, look, I've been told reliably that these people are doctors, lawyers, and engineers, that if we just set them to work, our economy would all be tickety-boo. What kind of moron brings out a sharp weapon on an inflatable boat?
Well, if he was a doctor, if we considered this might have been some form of emergency
It's a
surgery
scalpel,
gone wrong.
actually.
Oh,
It's
he
trying to
might
rescue him. He had emergency surgery that
Yeah, it might be gender affirming care, actually. 'Cause I've been reliably informed that lots of these people are LGBTQ fleeing oppression. So, all right, we know their character. We keep being told, judge me not by my color of my skin, but by the content of their character. Well, it seems that the content of their characters is repeatedly awful, so I'm judging them accordingly. So we know who they are. Where are they going? Well, it turns out that the government has confirmed 100 hotels used to house asylum seekers are going to be handed back to the public by the end of March. Brilliant. We're getting all our hotels back. So they're all going to be deported, right? Yeah, no. So officials say the 100th hotel will be handed back next Friday. So a week's time in a time of recording on Thursday the 21st. And the Home Office says the residents of all 100 hotels have been placed into other accommodations, such as large purpose-built sites and the private rented sector.
That's going to be potentially even more expensive then.
The housing market, you know that rent that you're competing for? The government are now buying private renting to stick random boat migrants.
Well, this is going to be I would assume, partially driven by that Serco contract, where they're going out into neighborhoods and trying to basically outbid private renters, private buyers, so that they can get the accommodation, stick the asylum seekers in there, meaning that if you live in a neighborhood in the country, you get no say as to who your neighbors are going to be, whereas before it might have been somebody who was a contributing member of society who had the money to be able to afford to move in next to you. Now it's going to be Serco airdropping asylum seekers into your previously peaceful neighborhood. Good luck with that. I hope you enjoy the all-night parties and music and shouting and all sorts that'll be going on there.
It's going to sound like King's Cross train station, exactly.
Have you considered the NHS needs more doctors? I mean, they're even coming across with their own acid attack kits. Yeah, just not to treat them, though, you know.
Yeah, well, this is the exact thing that we saw in the Wellingborough by-election with that elderly couple receiving a notice that the local council was trying to acquisition their house for asylum seekers. Remember, everyone, this is a choice. A deliberate choice is being made to accommodate foreigners who we know are criminals because they've committed a criminal act by breaking into the country, at the expense, quite literally financially, but also now in terms of just living space, of the native population. And rather than just presuming all these people came from France, because if you have no papers and they cross the channel, you must think, oh, they're French, we can just turn them back round to the French. No, the Border Force and the RNLI are providing a taxi service for the especially stabby ones straight into a hotel or local village near you. So the latest movements will mean there are 20,000 fewer asylum seekers in hotels now than 6 months ago, down from over 56,000 at the end of September 2023. The current arrangement costs £8.2 million a day. So this is going to be saving money, I'm sure. No, the housing costs under this plan is going to increase to 1.2 billion. Well, then. So this is the National Audit Office, that far-right organisation, that said the Home Office now expects to spend £1.2 billion on housing asylum seekers in large accommodation sites, around £46 million more than just using hotels. As part of the plan to move away from the over-reliance on hotel accommodation, the complaint wasn't that they were in the hotels, the complaint was that they were here in the country at my expense in the bloody first place. All right?
Taxation is theft, just to remind you.
Especially when it's being spent on criminal foreigners. The Home Office announced the redevelopment of a number of old military bases and other sites to provide large-scale asylum accommodation. I'm going to pause and just reading out this article. Old military barracks. When we have military servicemen sleeping on the streets that aren't afforded the same privilege, having actually served this country, and then you get a bunch of criminal foreigners packed in there instead, that's just extra insult to injury.
Well, the other factor of this as well, of course, is that this is going to be spreading them out further into the countryside as well. Because air bases, our RAF bases, military bases, disused ones are in the countryside. The sorts of housing that they'll be trying to drop these people into are more likely to end up being in the countryside as well. For all of the downsides of the hotel accommodation, you can at least say that it somewhat confines the trouble to larger urban centres where there are these hotels willing to take them in. Now that it's going to be private rented accommodation and military bases, all of a sudden those remnants of the country that we have out there in the countryside, the villages, the smaller market towns, are going to start seeing more of these people. And I've spoken to other people and have experienced it myself, that you're starting to see more and more foreign elements crop up in these once quiet, cozy countryside towns and villages, which, is not good as far as I'm concerned. If what we've seen from the larger urban centres is anything to be taken as an example, it will mean that these places will become filthier, they will become louder, they will get more crime in them, there will be community and cultural breakdown, all of it negative. But hey, the moral crusade that our leaders seem to have appointed to themselves might be satisfied in some obscure and absurd way.
Yeah, do you remember Linton on Ouse, where the population was dwarfed by the incoming migrant population, and all they had was a local church and a little shop, and they were going to stick about 1,500 grown men next to it? Not a concern for all of the schoolgirls who are underage according to British law, but certainly not in certain cultures and certain nations overseas, who might be preyed on by these men, as we've seen time and time again. So, just going back to this, because you've presaged this, by the end of March, the department expects to have spent 230 million developing 4 major projects. The Bivvy Stockholm barge in Portland, the one that the floating migrant barge where they've suddenly all converted to Christianity, I'm sure sincerely. The former RAF bases at Scampton in Lincolnshire and Wethersfield in Essex, and ex-student accommodation in Huddersfield. So we all remember paying for student accommodation. It was really pricey because lots of foreign students come over and buy the most expensive stuff and price native Brits out of staying in anything that isn't a flea-ridden bedsit.
It's a scam, isn't it? I went straight into private accommodation. I wasn't using the university's own accommodation because it was like 2 or 3 times the price.
I did the same thing. Now, even that's going to get even more scarce for UK students. So glad that they're doctors, lawyers, and engineers because they're right next to the place they can train again, I suppose. So far, just 2 of the sites are open, and we're only housing 900 people by the end of January, according to the Watchdog's findings. So, to look at where they were going to put these people, Martin Daubney, friend of the show, great show on GB News, by the way, gets good guests, go and watch that. He spoke to the chair of the Fields Association, a guy called Alan McKenzie, about one of the sites. And this is a real mask-off moment about the people who actually have to live with the consequences of this stuff, because we talk about immigration a lot on this show, and we talk about the criminal cases, but you don't always hear from the people who are having these people airdropped into their towns directly. So I'm just going to play you a little bit of his interview.
The chair of the Fields Association in Wethersfield, Alan McKenzie. Alan, welcome to the show. So figures out today about the huge cost of housing asylum seekers in large sites such as Wethersfield, where you are a representative of. Astonishing numbers. I mean, it was initially meant to cost £5 million to repurpose Wethersfield. The true figure is £49 million, 10 times more than they originally let on. And presumably, you guys still think it's the wrong idea, the wrong place.
Well, we've been saying that from the get-go. We warned the Home Office of the difficulties of the site. It's incredibly remote, 5 miles from the nearest A road, 20 miles from the nearest motorway. The site itself is pretty old. We told them that the main sewer pipe overflows an adjoining land, and therefore it won't be able to be utilised properly. We told them the water pressure there was low. They've had to mitigate that. The communications are terrible. They still have problems about providing Wi-Fi for the asylum seekers on the base. They were warned that the costs would be far, far heavier than ever they thought they possibly could be, and that's been brought to pass. The other factor that we warned, which is just common sense for anybody who thought about it, was that the thought of housing potentially 1,700 young men on a site where they couldn't get out to do anything to any intents and purposes was a recipe for disaster. And lo and behold, once they reached around about 500 people, the call-outs that existed from the emergency services, whether the police or ambulance, really got out of control, to the extent that when we met cleverly back at the end of January and again emphasised all of these concerns which were coming home to roost, the Home Office has at least now taken those concerns on board and issued a letter both to Scampton and in respect of Wethersfield, saying that they're going to limit numbers to a regular sort of total of about 800, which is still too many, because once you get that many young men together, they go into groups, whether by culture, whether by country, and some tensions arise, which is exactly what was found.
So battle royale.
Yeah, ethnic battle royale among the board asylum seekers, migrants, stabby migrants, criminal migrants, not to use their terminology, people that they know have committed crimes, both violent and financial already, that they're now airdropping into quiet little towns in Essex and the Cotswolds. And we are forced to pay for this.
Now, this isn't a serious idea, but lads, I have a cunning plan. This, except we close off a district of London and put cameras everywhere, broadcasting on the BBC 24/7, that might justify my license fee. Because can you imagine the entertainment that could be gained from it?
Well, I have been reliably
Battle Royale style, of course.
The diversity is our strength. So if you just put all the diversity in one place, it will become a thriving utopia. Yeah, it will become its own little Wakanda. And couldn't we just benefit from that?
Or we would recreate Arkham City.
Or we could do
either way, we profit somehow.
We've got the island of St. Helena, right? Just battle royale. Just say, all of you go over there, yeah. You know, we'll film what happens and we'll watch you build civilization, because of course that's what you're here to do, isn't it? It's to enrich our culture with your expertise. It's not to, you know,
disenfranchise.
Yeah, and that.
Yeah, rape, pillage, murder, which has already happened.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fascinating how they come from places which are utterly uncivilized, and we expect them to build civilization here. I suppose it's just the magic soil, but you're right, Harry, I like your idea. Diversity is not our strength, but it's certainly our entertainment. And speaking of diversity and entertainment, I just thought I'd end on one woman who thought that she'd arrived in the UK and then decided that actually the UK looks a lot like home and she doesn't really like it. And maybe there's some kind of connection between the appeasement to hostile foreigners and the fact that the UK no longer looks like the UK. Now, this clip was posted by Politics Joe, of all people. I'm surprised that they actually let this one out because it's really revelatory. Let's listen to her.
What politicians do and everything is doing, I think there is a big responsibility of the Muslim community in that, because we have tried to change the British. It is totally different now. It's nothing like Britain before. You know, it's everybody's like doing their own thing and they want to adapt everything. So this country's own culture has disappeared. You know, and I think this is something that needs to come back if we want to be, feeling the important. Because, you know, if the British society changed to other countries' rules and religious expectation and everything, then you cannot expect the Britain, politicians to be British to you.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So you think Britain has been too accommodating almost?
Yes, it is. And I think this multicultural, everything coming into it has made it like the society has changed to everybody's adaptations, like everybody's doing their own thing, schools and everything, they're like having different kind of holidays, everybody's having different kind of, their own adaptations. And I think, if you go to Tower Hamlets Council and you want to speak to someone about, before I would go to council and I would see that they would expect it and they understand me. But now they will be like, oh, in your culture, it happens, so adapt to it.
Is she in our comments right now? Is she a Lotus Eaters viewer? Why did Politics Joe release this?
I don't know. Average Camus reader, I suppose.
It's funny because I've heard other Muslims say similar things like this. And it's, if it gets to the point where even Muslims are just like, hang on a minute, we need to bring Britain back to being British again, that really speaks to the level of problem.
Well, it's interesting the reasons that she says it as well, is that she likes the politicians and the people being British towards her, which means, I would assume, a certain level of polite manners and toleration and understanding, which she knows that the sorts of people that are coming into Tower Hamlets Council, as she explained there, don't have those same standards. They don't have those same cultural values. They're more than eager and willing to brush aside any concerns that she has and say, well, that's just how it happens where you're from.
She associates Britishness with excellence, and the more you erase Britishness, specifically Englishness, because we are in England, in public life in favor of appeasing foreign cultures who have committed crimes in order to be here, the more standards slip and the more civilization gets worse. And so
I can only imagine if it had been, and I know I hate to do the, imagine if, blah, 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 but imagine.
Here lies conservatism.
Can you imagine if it was a white person, a British person saying this? The Politics Joe interviewer would be all over them trying to say, well, those are racist talking points. You can't say that other cultures and other peoples have different values and behaviors that come more naturally to them. Of course, they're going to behave in the exact way that we would expect British people to, because Britain is all just about diversity and being open to other cultures. Yeah, well, the cultures that they're coming from aren't open to other cultures, and they're going to bring that culture over here.
There's a reason that they left, and also there's a reason that loads of Brits aren't going to Pakistan or, Eritrea or all of these
racism.
It's just racism, isn't it? It's not that, our culture and our country is better by many, many metrics.
Yeah, well, on Monday night's debate, and I finished with this, I suppose, on mass immigration, Aaron Bastani got up and said, you wouldn't want to be a homogenous country with low immigration, would you? Because a homogenous country is North Korea, a communist country, Aaron, from a communist outlet. And he said, all the nations that have low immigration are Iran, Iraq, Eritrea. You wouldn't want to be those, would you? I wonder, Aaron, if they have low immigration and they're failed states, then there might be something about their culture and people's values that make them a failed state. So why would we import them all here to then change Britain? But I'm sure that just I and this woman are furthering the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, and I hope you enjoy your time in the UK. Inshallah.
Hi folks, thanks for watching. If you'd like to support us, you can go to lotuseats.com and sign up for £5 a month, and go and join Calvin Robinson's Common Sense Crusade, which broadcasts live every Thursday afternoon. And if you want more updates from us, you can go to Twitter and follow us at lotuseaters_com.